Hello, hello. Welcome back to The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom 100 Years Later project. Woo! We're working on our own sequel to Tears of the Kingdom set 100 years after the fact. So, it's been a hot minute since I did things, but I think I remember what I wanted to work on. I'm just looking at the map again and being like, yee. So we've got Gerudo territory here, Rito territory here, the Great Forest and Korok territory, the Goron territory. Although, here's the thing I was thinking about this that I want to adjust. We made a very big point of the fact. This is the layer, right? Yeah. The Gorons don't really control Death Mountain anymore. They've kind of given up their hold on it because they've all pushed underground. So I think the Goron territory has actually shrunk, as Hylians have moved in and taken it, and now this is the only really area that is a Goron claim to ownership, but even then, they're not even actually, like, if anything, it's just this. They're not really fighting to keep the Death Mountain anymore, and Hylians have just sort of full-on moved in. And in a similar boat, I'm debating if I want to extend how much land is considered the domain of the Zora, right? But I don't think I will extend the domain of the Zora, and looking at this and thinking on it. Yeah, so that's just the change I wanted to make to the upper section, but what we've been working on. Oh, by the way, as I've said many times, if you can get me a higher quality map of the Tears of the Kingdom world map and the Underground, please head over to my Discord and throw them at me. I want better quality maps. But let's look at the Underworld. Yeah, so we've been steadily working our way through getting the Underworld territories all set. So what we have to do now is the areas around here, which is underneath Lanayru, and then over here. Jeez, oh my god, it's been so long since we really looked at this. Yeah, so for those who are only hopping on this episode, I'm trying to design a sort of pseudo Tears of the Kingdom sequel that would be set 100 years after the fact that I may turn into a tabletop adventure with my friends. In terms of what the color coding we're looking at here is in the Underworld, so, hang on. Let me turn off some of the layers to just quickly go over it. Whoops. These are biomes. So, areas that you would burn from being hot, area that you will freeze from being cold, area that is dry, and area that has a constant electric storm, and area where all the rocks are too wet to climb. That's the biomes of the underground here. This is areas that have become overgrown with new underground life and jungles and dinosaurs. This is lands underground that are controlled by the Hylians and the people of Hyrule and their allies, the Gorons, the Rito, the Zora, etc. This is territory controlled by the Yiga. And, like I said, this is just a biome, so we're gonna turn off the biome layer. And this is what we've been trying to work out, is all of this. Oh yeah, so we gotta go do all of the bottom right corner of the map, and then, the center of the map is the plan right now. So, let me look at, I have a map I'm using to help guide me through this. So we're gonna just all at once tackle the, all of the wilds of the underground, I think, next. Let's just get a nice big brush size. I'm using things like the locations of, the frogs and any areas labeled as a glade on the map as guidance on where I want to put things. So, for example, I'm just trying to look at where we are in comparison. Yeah. I'm gonna want to do all of this as wildland because there's a giant frog there. The frogs, that's what they're called. There's gonna be a frogs right here. Not seeing any areas labeled as glade, though, that would induce a greater spread of stuff. I'm just looking through things on thing. Okay, so this area isn't labeled as a glade, but I am sure as shit gonna treat it like a glade with how much plant life there is there. What's going on in the upper area up there? Oh, that's underneath Betra Lake. That's the Betra Park. Okay. Yeah, I have a the Zelda Dungeon interactive map open on the side to help me with setting all of this up. I also want to make it that anywhere where there is a, like, potential boss spawn area is wildland. So this is all wildland as well, right here. There's a grove over here, which is going to spur more growth. Couple of groves here. And while it's not labeled as a grove, that's a grove enough area for me to want to put growth there. Okay. Moving down a little bit. This area I'm gonna overgrow because there's a boss ring there. For a flux construct. Am I seeing any other areas labeled as glades? Not really. There's a glade over here. I'm just gonna fill all of that in. A giant frog lives down here. A giant frog lives over here. Still no areas labeled as glades, surprisingly enough. Alright, that's our initial run through with that. We'll add more with time. Next, we want to label the Yuga-controlled areas by looking at where Yuga camps exist. A Yuga camp exists right here. But we marked this area as being under control by the Hylians already. So actually, let's... I'm going to call this contested zone. So I'm labeling it as under control of both. With the idea being that, like, neither... Or, you know what? No, you know what? This is going to be a place that is already labeled as Yuga territory that I'm actually going to say the Hylians have just completely taken control of. As an area where they're starting to get a foothold. Let's see here. So yeah, let's look at where all the Yuga bases are down here. There's a Yuga base over here in this lake, so that'll be Yuga's territory. Let's shrink our brush size down to 50. I just realized I missed a definite wild zone right here, because there's a thing there. A flux construct. Alright, Yuga base there. There's the mines over here, and anywhere that's a mine is being treated as Yuga territory. So all of this is sort of a big Yuga settlement. Oh, Jesus. Yeah, I think moved more than I wanted to. I feel like they've fully... Do I want to say they've fully conquered the... You know what? I think we're going to call this... We're going to say the Hylians have successfully claimed this area. They put a very high importance on claiming this region. And, like, pushed in and took this entire corner of the underground as one of their additional underground bases. This is one of the areas where Hylians are winning. Because they would have put a high importance on reclaiming the construct factory that's located here. But the Yiga, meanwhile, do have a base running through right here. And I think they've dug a tunnel through this section now, so they sort of control, like, you know, they have a base located underneath the Hylian one that they're sort of, like, staking themselves out at. The Yiga base would be here. And I think the Yiga have successfully claimed the Spirit Temple temporarily. And that'll be part of the narrative, is the player trying to claim the Spirit Temple back. There's a Yiga base over here. Although, hang on, let me shrink down my brush size by a lot, because I gotta remember to pay attention to what kind of bases they are. It's right here is where it is. And it's one of those ones that's just a little, like, elevated position, so I can easily say they don't control a lot around it, per se. This is all gonna be Yiga base over in this area. There's another mine over here that the Yiga would have claimed. Another mine over here that the Yiga would have claimed. Yeah, I already marked that as theirs. Okay. Starting to curve up and around over to here, where there's going to be... Yeah, I think the Yiga have currently caught and claim over all of this. Maybe, maybe not. Yeah. The Linear Canyon mine, I think they have control over. And then here and here. And I think that basically spells out to them controlling all of this lower section as one big expanded mine they're working on. There's a little circular Yiga base right here. And a mine over here. There's the Colosseum here that they definitely control. Along with a Yiga base here that they will have expanded through. So I think, yeah, that's like a stretched out base segment. There's an abandoned mine here that they will have claimed. And all the way up here, there's this abandoned mine. And I'm realizing I missed more grove growth there that I could be doing, but we'll touch on that in a second. Oh, and there's also already a Yiga encampment there as well. Alright, there's a Yiga base here in lore. I realize I'm missing a marker type on my interactive map that I gotta turn back on. How do I turn on bosses? Bosses. Looks like because of how they changed things. We'll worry about that in a moment. Yeah, I got that Yiga base marked up. Okay. Let's work a little bit more on expanding the wilds a bit more. So, everything up here, I think, would be wild zone. And, like, that would spread around here. I'm using the wrong shade of green. There we go. And I think it would expand around this ring as well. That's the thing I decided I want to do. Because I think I mentioned that in my headcanon, the reason that bosses spawn at these big rings is that they were built to be like a test for the champion, where they will spawn in a phantom of a danger. They will, so like, in the era that this story is taking place, they will be spawning in different enemies when you visit them than what they did in the base game. Alright, just looking at the map and thinking about how I want to spread the wilds around. I think I want all of this to be wild zone. Yee. Yee. And then this entire area, boom, boom, is also going to be wild zone. There we go. Obviously, this whole circle, outreach here is going to be wild zone. The wild zone over here hasn't really spread out much, I don't think. These wild zones here, I actually don't think are going to be connected for once, but this one is going to sort of spread across here. And then yeah, I'm just looking at the maps, thinking about that grove will look kind of like that. And this grove will sort of blob around this area a little. These two groves are going to connect across this upper area with that Yiga base there is one of the elevated Yiga bases, so it works out well. Yeah, and so that's how the wilds have spread around this area. Actually, I want to say pretty much everything along this section that isn't Yiga base, I want to have be overgrown to sort of reflect the jungle above. Yeah. Hang on, I'm just looking at the other map. Yeah, so... Yeah, okay. Yiga base. Now let's look at Yiga territory a little bit. What size did I make that? I think that was like a size 10 brush. Yeah, okay. That's what we use to work out the roads. So I think this Yiga settlement will have reached up and expanded a little bit more onto land. Like this. And there'll be a jungle hug, like a road, a path they have going through this jungle to connect this to there. And then from there, hang on, I'm just looking at the in-game map to think about how they would have likely carved their paths around. I think they'd have a path going up through on this lower section here, with a split off there, and run around like this. This connects more or less like that. Lots of walkways and paths through here, because this is just a well-controlled area. This pathway would run along the wall, looping around like that. A Yiga encampment hugging the wall again with their walkways before reaching across, sort of like they do it kind of like this. Go. I'm just looking at like the environmental elevation. Ooh, hang on. I realize there's another thing that should be indicating wild zone here that I missed. Two things, honestly. Yeah, basically this whole area down here should all be additional wild zone, is what I've just realized. Because there's a few more enemy spawn points down here that the Yiga would be contending with. There we go. Right, back to the Yiga layer. Pull out the red. Just like this. And I think this is another case of they will have dug a tunnel into the world. Just looking at that area and making sure, yeah, the height even makes sense. Yeah, the Yiga opening more paths around, which actually, let's go ahead and, do that to hint at the underlying tunnel. So, you know, like, the Hylians can still use the upper path to try and navigate, but the Yiga are operating in the lower section there. But a lot of these jungles prevent them from really getting a lot of in-depth exploration going. Alright, yeah, okay. So that's that whole section of the underground sorted out. And let's go ahead and cap things off by looking at Central Hyrule's underground section and figuring out how much the Yiga control and how much the Hylians control and how much is Wild Zone. So, let's start off with working out the Wild Zones. Ba-ba-bum. A frog spawns in over here, indicating Wild Zone. A frog spawns in down here, indicating Wild Zone pretty much for this entire section, I feel like. A frog spawns in over here, indicating Wild Zone. This area here is called the Grove of Time, so that expands the Wild Zone up here. Giant's Grove is over here. That will cause a spread of the greenery. None of the scattered trees in these areas are called groves, but there is also another enemy here that causes a spread of growth, so it's going to go like this. And then we got a frog right around here, so we're going to blob out this. So unsurprisingly, not a lot of jungle undergrowth in the central Hyrule Field area, because, you know, it's mimicking the area above, which didn't have a lot of growth. Cool, cool, cool. Now let's look at where the Yiga would be. Based off Yiga encampments down here, and mine placements, which I know there is not a lot. In fact, the only places that look like they should have Yiga bases. Okay, okay. Very interesting, actually. There's a Yiga base here. And there's a Yiga base here. We're gonna go ahead and connect those with our path like this. And a tunnel through here that the Yiga will have dug. And what that tells me is we can increase the Hylian foothold down here. So, I'm thinking... Hang on. Does the map show the thing I'm looking for? I know that you're supposed to be able to find some statues not far from the Great Hyrulean Chasm. Where is it? I'm looking at the map trying to see where the statues are placed, you know? Are they not marked on the map? Really? I feel like I'm just missing it. Hang on, can I tag quest marks on here? Here we go. Let's see here. I've just activated all quest markers. Okay, so yeah, the statues are just very hard to make out on this map. Hang on, I gotta sit up a little more and squint my eyes. So there'd be a statue right here. Hang on. I wonder if somebody's made a map marking where all the underground statues are. Here we go, yes. Exactly what I thought. Map of the silly little statues in the depths. That is actually going to be very helpful for what I'm trying to figure out here. Because I feel like the Hylians would be trying to sort of follow this path that these statues make with some of their expansion and exploration. I'm looking at a whole like a couple of images you guys can't see. Sorry, because they're on my other monitor. Okay. So the statues run down this way and curve around through this. But I don't think they will have expanded that far because they're afraid of the wild creatures there. All right. Now, are there any other things that I can look at that I can use as like a guide of how the Hylians might have expanded? Nothing I can really look at or think of. So, I think there might be a whole like, so there's this whole like massive underground encampment, and I think there'd be another underground encampment like over here. They will use these to mark off a corner, like, you know, make walls using the pillars here, here, and here. And then expand it out this way a little bit towards the statues. And they probably have those statues as sort of part of their territory. Yeah, there we go. So that's the central Hyrule, like, underground. So hang on, that's right underneath Lookout Landing, isn't it? Hang on, is it? Well, not exactly right underneath, but my brain wants to say that this is like a counterpart to Lookout Landing. What's going on here? Like drop-off point or something they call the settlement that they built here. Yeah, so that is the underground. Thoroughly done. Holy shit, okay. I'd say I'm pretty happy with how that looks. So next time, I want to place a set of dungeons in the underground and do a little something else in addition to that. So, I think, yeah, that we're done with this episode of Tears of the Kingdom 100 Years Later. Hope you all enjoyed this one. I'd love to hear your ideas down below of how I can improve this project, and ta-ta for now.